That's why I sent it to my mom saying an idea for Christmas.
So it's a super overdrive?
Super overdrive.
An overdrive is a lot for bass.
Yeah.
Welcome. You are entering a strange realm. A realm of what ifs. What if movies, television shows, and video games were better, worse, bizarrer, or downright different? What might they look like? Find out on today's episode of CineCasters.
Welcome back to the CineCasters. This is a show where we watch television shows or movies and then deconstruct them, talk about them, and then reconstruct them in new ways that might work better for what we think they were trying to drive at in terms of themes or philosophy or even just narrative trajectory. I am Janglez, and today I'm joined by Alessa.
Hi.
And if you're just joining us, this is part 2 of our Kick-Ass series, which we're doing as part of Suptember 2022.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you should go check out the other movie, which was Kick-Ass Part 1. Okay, Alessa, Kick-Ass 2, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. It felt really long.
That's not a huge endorsement. For me, I felt like this movie was worse.
Yeah.
It did some things better. I thought the action, you can clearly tell like the budget was bigger.
Yeah.
But I actually think that the indie vibe of the first half of the first movie, that's the part that really grabbed me, and I think you as well, was really working for this movie.
Yeah.
And now I felt like the indie-ness was lost.
Yeah.
Like it was a bit flashier, it was a bit bigger, especially because the superhero costumes are all like
so corny.
Yeah, and they're supposed to be corny. But when the villains show up, when Christopher Mintz-Plasse, his character Chris D'Amico, shows up and is like, I'm the motherfucker and here's my team of like terrible superheroes, it started to feel like still gimmicky.
Yeah.
But more like they're supervillains.
Yeah.
For like actual real life supervillains. And
especially because some of them did have like these strange abilities, like Mother Russia was able to like punch the car hood in. Like,
yeah.
I was like, that's just, we're beyond believability. Like we were already kind of on that edge, but now we're like actually
as soon as Hit Girl showed up in the first movie, we were way beyond that. It was beyond believable anymore. It was no longer... which sucked. We talked about that last round. This time for me, it was some problems that I had in terms of like Hit Girl is trying to move on.
Yep.
But her entire arc is really high school.
Yeah.
And while I think it's a good angle, like let's have Hit Girl move on because she's promised Marcus and like there's a transitive property if she promised her dad to listen to Marcus, which means any promise she makes to Marcus is a promise to her dad, and vice versa. So I feel like that really, really worked in terms of her arc. I just felt like this girl has like saved the city, got revenge on her father, cuts up dudes bad guys' limbs and whatnot, and is like caught up in the petty shit of high school drama. Like the whole point of Dave becoming Kick-Ass was to get away from his bullies in high school shit, right?
Yeah.
Hit Girl is already there. She's already the most badass person on screen. I just felt like her arc shouldn't have been so petty.
Yeah.
Like to get caught up in the high school drama. It just didn't... I think it would have been interesting if she had got caught up with it, but then it didn't matter to her.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like if they were pretending to be her friend, because I still think that's a bit cliche in terms of storytelling, like the popular girl clique, and then but then turning out that they're not actually her friends because she has no gauge of like how to make friends. That would have been more interesting. Mm-hmm. But her getting caught up in like the being embarrassed, that doesn't make sense to me, especially because the only reason she went on that date was because it was to try and stick it to Dave.
Yep.
So like there was some things that just particularly Hit Girl really pissed me off in this movie.
It's just, I think she allowed herself to get caught up in it because she hasn't really had the chance to hang out with people her age.
But the fact that she winds up going on the date was because she was trying to stick it to Dave. If it had been more...
But then she said it's because like he wouldn't stop messaging her, the guy that she went out with.
Yeah, I don't know if that was actually I mean, it's possible. I just felt like, okay, show, don't tell, right?
Yeah.
So if they had shown this guy being interested in her and then all of a sudden having, like, she's all of a sudden experiencing these new feelings, especially when we saw her with the music video. And all of a sudden she was experiencing like, whoa, like, this is what boys are. This is, because I didn't think there was anything wrong with that necessarily. I thought the way it was shown was a little strange. But I didn't think there was anything necessarily wrong with having Hit Girl be a 14, 15-year-old girl and all of a sudden experience these emotions that she was never allowed to before, and the freedom to play with those emotions. But that's not what this movie really gives us. It doesn't give us Hit Girl playing with those. It doesn't give us this experience. Instead, it's just sort of like a series of things that play out narratively. Whereas like I was like, I want to feel this character explore her romantic side, her sexual side, because she hasn't been allowed to be a girl, and that's what Marcus wants for her. Yeah. Right? And so it's there, but it's not done well enough. So when she has a boy chasing after her and is allowed to explore these feelings and her sexuality, that could have been told like, oh no, she really is trying to be the young woman that she wasn't allowed to be before. The childhood she wasn't given because of her dad. Mm-hmm. And then to have that rug pulled out from under her and have her go back to being Hit Girl, that would have been a much more satisfying arc. Yeah. Because it would have been like, oh, she can't get away from who she really is. Do I agree with that arc? No. I think my version of the movie goes in a different direction. However, I think that arc for Hit Girl would have been more believable. Yeah. But Hit Girl even leaving at the end, I thought was, I don't know.
In my brain, when she left, I was like, girl, you're 15. Where are you going?
Right? Like, now I think the idea is she's such a badass, she'll look after herself. But at the same time, I think for me, the problem at the end was sort of giving us two things. Like, it was kind of like, we can't ever do this again. Superheroes are done. Yeah. And yet Hit Girl is running from herself in order to continue being Hit Girl. Like Mindy. And so for Dave, it was like, you can't be a superhero anymore. But somehow for Mindy, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And that was
I feel like they were trying to set up for some type of a third movie.
There was the possibility of a third movie, rumors. And I thought about doing like a third. Where would you go with this? But I
also had an idea for like a side, not really a third movie, but more
I want to hear your pitch about it later. But for me, it was this felt very final. Yeah. The only thing that they really could have gone for was like more Hit Girl, and which would have been an interesting angle because it would have been like Hit Girl comes back. I'm thinking like 5 years in the future. Dave's getting ready to
20 and
Dave's getting ready to go off to college or whatever. Yeah. He's 18 or maybe he's already in university somewhere in the city, and Hit Girl comes back, and but she's doing all the work, but she's a vigilante, and Marcus knows who she is, and Dave knows who she is, and nobody else. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, what are we going to do? I can see Alyssa's trying to reach for her coffee. Hold on. We can see like, Marcus doesn't want to bring her in, but she's doing something that's illegal, right? In this episode, in this movie, we found out that superheroes are no longer allowed. Yeah. But I still feel like the point of this was to move on. That's the feeling that I was getting in it. It was like, Hit Girl can't move on. I also thought a big theme was also like, the last theme was last movie was about caring. This movie was a lot about finding your people. Yes. It's a lot about team ups but it's always Mindy and Dave.
But Mindy never finds her people.
Exactly. But it kind of with Dave. Yeah. But Dave was looking for someone to team up with, and he wants it to be Mindy, but it can't be Mindy, so he winds up with the Justice Forever Society,
which is a terrible name,
which is whatever they're called, the Justice Forever.
Justice Forever.
But it's fine. Like, it's supposed to be corny. It's supposed to be bad. What I liked about the Justice Forever Society was that they were doing community service. Yeah, and that felt real. It was like they weren't even. It didn't matter that they were superheroes. They were just out there feeling like they were making a difference because they were doing community service. Yeah. When they go after the gang members in order to save the prostitutes, it's played the same way as they were doing community service, and that did not jive with me because those two things were very different.
They are very different, yeah.
Right? Where it was all of a sudden like, oh, you're going from doing community service to vigilantism, and those two things are not the same at all.
Would it be like, did they kill anyone?
No, but that's not what vigilantism is.
No, but I just...
Like, you're welcome to make I don't know how it works in Canada, but in the States you can make a citizen's arrest. Like, you're allowed to do that.
Yep.
But you just can't run in and put the law into your own hands. It's illegal.
Yeah.
Right? It's also, you can be charged with vigilantism. I think you can also be charged with obstruction of justice because you're getting in the way of investigations and whatnot.
Right.
So, like, I'm not saying that like bounty hunters are also a thing, but there's like, you need a license for those kinds of things, even being a PI. Like, there's training that police officers go through. So you can't just like throw yourself into those situations and take the law into your own hands, because generally people fuck up.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought there was like this disconnect between the community service, which I thought was just really cute. Like, people dressing up as superheroes in order to do community service, because that is like...
That felt like
good.
The first half of the first movie.
Yeah.
Like, he's out saving someone's cat in his uniform, and he's just having a good time, and then all of a sudden he gets sucked into these big jobs.
But even the knife thing where he beats the guys with the knife, that still felt real.
Yeah.
And like we talked about, the knife felt like stakes for him. We'd already seen him get stabbed. But this time around, it was like they're out doing community service and it feels good. They're making a difference. But then they actively put themselves in a situation in order to like go up against gangsters. That's not the same. Like, there was a leap in stakes.
I do have to say, when we got to that point, Stars and Stripes, the leader of Justice Forever, for some reason I was like, something is up with you. I don't know, like, something is gonna happen, you're gonna betray the group, but then he doesn't. And I feel really bad that I was suspicious of him, but just because of that change in tone, I was like, So
I did look this up because I wasn't aware, but this is actually like a self-published comic series.
Oh, is it?
Or graphic novel series. Yeah, some dude just started making these comics. So there's like 5, 6, or 7, maybe up to 8 different volumes of Kick-Ass. So,
well, that's cool.
The first movie is about the first volume, I think, and the second movie is the second and third volume, I think. Don't quote me on that. But I did look into it because I was like, I wonder if there's another movie coming out. And I looked up like Kick-Ass 3, and somebody was like, yeah, there's like 8 volumes. And I was like, I meant the movie, but this is still fascinating.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe this might have worked better in graphic novel form.
Definitely.
Because the leap in like violence and in vigilantism might have made more sense in the medium. I don't know. It's hard to tell because I haven't read it.
Yeah.
But because I feel like the biggest limitation to this movie is that it is a comedy, but it also wants to take itself seriously in very bizarre ways. The tonality is like, how can we go from Hit Girl being like, oh, I'm sad because these mean girls were mean to me and I'm gonna get my revenge on them, and then in the next scene have her almost get her neck broken by a woman named Mother Russia. Like, the comedy is there, but the stakes are very different.
Yeah.
It's tonally still frustrating. And like, this needs to be a high school drama the way it was in the first half of the first movie, or it needs to be a superhero. It needs to be a high school drama where they pretend to be superheroes. Sounds fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Or it needs to be a straight up superhero where they fight
like
these people.
They really should have just taken a page from Kim Possible's book, obviously.
I like Kim Possible, but I think we can get away with Kim Possible because it pushes the realm of realism. Like, it's a cartoon and it's over the top, but they try to keep it grounded. It's not that grounded, but I'm assuming you're talking about the cartoon and not the...
Yeah, the cartoon, not the movie, which we did.
Which we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think... I don't know. I think we should talk about some good things before we hate on this movie too much. So... I do have some good things, but I want to hear yours.
Okay, so the first one is that I thought that they were going to kind of turn the relationship between Mindy and Dave into more of like a sibling...
Yeah,
kind of
I got
thing.
that too. Like, Dave doesn't really see her that way, but she sees him that way.
Yeah. And I was like, I liked it better when they were just two weirdos fighting together, but like, I don't know. I really wanted them to be more like sibling-like.
Mm-hmm.
And we got that in the one scene where Mindy was obviously like, she was upset and she came in.
And she went to Dave because Marcus wouldn't understand. And I liked that.
Yeah.
And I also liked that. I think like Mindy, I don't even know if she really liked Marcus, liked Dave.
Yeah.
But she does kiss him, which hints at romantic feelings. But I think it's interesting that Dave doesn't, in the way that he was like in the first movie talking about Katie, he doesn't do that at all with Mindy.
Yeah.
So I wonder if it's like maybe Mindy crushing on Dave, but Dave not interested in Mindy.
Yeah.
Which I think is also an interesting dynamic.
But it's also interesting because even though Dave doesn't have those feelings, he's still like hounding on her about something, right?
Well, there's a dynamic
really wants
there.
her to be his
she has something that he wants. Like, it's just a
Yeah.
good wants needs dynamic. I don't even think that Mindy needs to be in love with Dave. We do see her check him out later.
Yep.
But I think that speaks to Mindy's arc. Like I said, there's an interesting arc there about her experiencing romantic feelings.
Yeah, like she's had like an awakening.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh my God,
Dave.
There's a muscular, well, he wasn't that muscular, but he's like a muscular dude in front of me.
Yeah. And, but I think it's interesting because we see Mindy checking Dave out, and Dave was always a nerd.
Yeah.
So it was actually like because of Mindy that Dave looks that way.
Yep.
And so like, there's like, it's a moment where like, if you're paying attention, it ties up both of their arcs quite nicely.
Yeah.
So I think, I don't know, to me it was like, well, why they didn't even need it to be romantic, and I'm not even sure it was romantic. Like, just having Mindy kissing Dave as a way of exploring her sexuality and her emotions.
Right.
But maybe not even because she likes Dave. I think she admires Dave. She wants to be friends with Dave, and maybe she just wanted to experiment with kissing him.
Yep.
But what's interesting is that I like how Dave, at least at this point in time, has either not examined his feelings with Mindy or does not feel romantically inclined towards Mindy, which I think does have a nice sibling dynamic. It just gets confusing with that kiss.
Yeah.
But the kiss is for her arc, not his.
Yeah.
So if we're going to get really analytical about it, I really think that this movie actually works better if Mindy is the main character, not Dave.
I agree.
Which is so interesting because the last movie I was like, Hit Girl shouldn't be in it. And I kicked myself because when I watched this movie, I was like, oh, Mindy's the main character of this movie. Like, Dave is in it, but Mindy is our main character, even though I'm not a huge fan of her arc. Which made me kick myself because in my pitch, I basically rewrote and had Hit Girl removed from a lot of it. So now I was like, how do I reconcile the fact that I want Mindy to be the main character but basically don't have her in my movie?
Figure it out.
Yeah, I don't know if mine really functions well as a sequel, but thematically it does, maybe not narratively.
I feel like mine doesn't function that great as a sequel to the one I wrote, but neither did this one. So
I loved the name Dr. Gravity.
I liked that too.
That's
and I
actually
really,
like out of all of the names in this entire thing,
that's like
Dr.
the best
Gravity
one.
is like actually the best one. Now, the actor who plays him is Donald Faison, I think his name is. He's from Scrubs. The actor who plays him is fine, but the character behind the mask, I don't think we ever get Dr. Gravity's name.
No, we
but
don't.
The character behind the mask is not like actually a physicist. He's just like a superhero, which I think is fun, and that's funny in itself.
Yep.
But out of all the names and characters, I was like, Dr. Gravity would be a dope name for either a villain or a hero who just like has control over gravity and is like a physicist who got their powers through, science hijinks and Flash Gordon type stuff.
Yep.
I like, that's a legit name.
Just really enjoy how he like said something about his baseball bat having a gravity thing, and then it actually turns out that it doesn't, but then it has spikes. And I was like, okay, I like this guy, he's funny. I wish we had more time with him on screen.
It's a really good bit part.
Yeah,
it's fun. He isn't really important, but he's there. So he was probably a highlight. I also did like Jim Carrey as Colonel Stars and Stripes. I just thought that there wasn't enough done with the character. So like you said, I had thoughts and inclinations that he was going to betray or maybe turn out to be something that he's not, or even maybe be an actual hero like Big Daddy. But It wasn't. And I think casting Jim Carrey in that role is actually brilliant, but it's a missed opportunity to do something with the character.
Definitely.
Because Jim Carrey has the capacity for comedy and seriousness.
Yep.
And I thought this would be a really, really interesting like way. They did a parallel with Dave and his dad with Hit Girl and Big Daddy, puke. But I actually think they could have done something really interesting with Colonel Stars and Stripes winding up being the hero for everyone, the leader of Justice Forever, and winding up like dying for whatever reason, and then everyone having to come together over him, and then Dave understanding not the loss of his father, but the loss of a hero.
Yeah.
And like what that means to lose a hero.
Yeah, that could have been really deep, and they just didn't do anything about it.
I think that's what they were going for, but it feels more like vengeance and less like a loss.
Yeah.
Like they're like, because immediately it's overshadowed by Dave's dad getting captured.
Yeah.
Which again is like, whoa, next level shit. Like all of a sudden stuff just ramps up in a way that doesn't feel tonally the same. Logically, it makes sense. They're like no more superheroes at all, right? Because the events make sense. Like Colonel Stars and Stripes gets killed, so it's murder. Now all superheroes are like banned.
Yeah.
So that makes sense like causally, but tonally, the loss of Colonel Stars and Stripes doesn't give us anything character-wise because we immediately move on to Dave's dad and the eventual killing of Dave's dad, which is like brutal. He gets hung in a jail cell. Like, I don't understand what this movie is, if it's comedic or serious. It's really frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the violence in the first movie was comedic.
It was.
It was over the top, and tonally it was a shift. But then again, we get this tonal shift here where the violence is no longer comedic. It's now serious, particularly with Mother Russia.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. And I'm not sure if I like am supposed to be mad at Chris D'Amico as the motherfucker, because it's funny how like silly his character is, but then the stuff that he does is not funny. He has people die because of him.
It's, I don't know, I feel like I understood his character in that it was just that spoiled brat, just did not care. He clearly has no actual like care for his parents, because
his mom was played by a different actress.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Very different characterization.
Yeah. But his whole thing about going after Kick-Ass because his dad died I don't think it was for his dad's sake. I think it was just
like being an emo acting out kid.
Yeah.
I got that in the first movie. Less so in this movie. In this movie, it's like, I don't know what your motivation is. Like, he's like, I want to be a supervillain, like, for vengeance, but I never really got that.
Yeah.
And this was...
that's the thing, though. What I'm trying to say is it's not for vengeance for him. It's just because that's just what he wants to do.
Yeah.
He just wants to be evil
because he's emo.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I kind of felt like we were... Because we talked about it in the first movie, I felt like we should have got a redemption arc from him.
Yeah. I wanted to.
And
suddenly he just turned into the worst.
He's just very silly.
Yeah.
He's like I don't know, it doesn't work. Like, to me, the real villain here that they were setting up was like Chris being like, oh, he's going to be the villain. And then when his uncle shows up and actually kills
I actually
Javier,
thought that was going to be like the big turning point, but no.
And then his uncle all of a sudden is like, oh, like you were messing with real people. Like, I've been sitting in prison because here I'm safe. There are other gangs out there that want me dead. And like, he's like, I could get out anytime I want. And then you realize like he's running everything from inside the prison. And now it's like Kick-Ass, the Colonel, and even Chris, like as returning as the Red Mist, are finally like, we have to take this guy down.
That would have been a really good idea.
Because like,
I wish I had that idea.
I didn't go in that direction. I wanted to keep mine really my stakes lower while still being meaningful, because we had talked about the whole like scene with the gun and whatnot. So I was like, I'm gonna go in a little bit more in that direction and keep things sane as we go forward. In my pitch, Dave is the main character, although
Dave is also the main character.
I really think that Hit Girl's a far more interesting character.
Yeah.
Can
I do some of my surface level things that really bother me?
Yeah, I was just looking through more of mine, yeah.
This doesn't happen very often, but occasionally there's a movie where just like certain little details just take me out of it. The first one being that Mindy on her motorcycle, which I don't think she's allowed
old
to
enough to
drive.
drive.
Yeah. So I think actually in some places you can get a motorcycle license earlier than you can get a car license, but I don't think the States is one of them.
Depends on which state.
It might. Because I think
each state is different.
Yeah. Just like how I think we can technically get our driver's license at 15 in one of the provinces up here, but I don't remember which one.
I wouldn't know.
I think it's like Alberta or something. Anyways, good old Alberta.
You can get your learner's permit, but not your license.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first thing that really drew me out of it was when she's like driving, she does like a stunt and they like really focus in on her as she puts her foot down during a turn. I was like, you don't
do that
unless you're doing a very specific thing and that's not what you were doing.
But it looks good.
But it's like, no, if you're gonna do that, put your knee down. Like, come on.
Yeah, but remember, movies are often about spectacle. That's why they hire actors and not musicians to play music parts.
I know.
Which is infuriating.
It is. My other thing, again, was a Mindy thing where she's on top of the van and she had like just used the gun to like shoot down into the van, and then she puts her fingers in the hole, and I'm like, your fingers. I was like cringing the whole time. I was like, those would be so sharp.
Yeah.
And that was like the two things that drew me instantly out of it. I was like, nope.
For me, this pulled me out of it, but not for a reason I thought I would. This pulled me out just because I noticed it. It was that at one point in time, the Tetris theme is playing, but it's like a hard rocked version of the Tetris theme. I can't remember. I just wrote it down. I was like, is this a Tetris theme for some reason?
I feel like I would remember that, but
I was like, this is it's straight up the Tetris theme.
I don't remember that, but okay, yeah.
And I was fine with it. I was just sort of like, but why? Like, again, I'll say it.
They just needed something, I guess.
feel like Scott Pilgrim does everything this movie does, but better.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. This movie.
There isn't a second Scott Pilgrim, is there?
No, there's not. There doesn't need to be.
No.
Scott, that was a pretty solid movie. There's the graphic novels go into far more like detail about certain events. Yeah. So it is like a retelling more than an adaptation of Scott Pilgrim. But yeah. I can hear you giggling over there, so.
I have 3 notes here. You might like them. I've got one that says this movie is not good. Another one that says this movie is too long. And then another one, you can guess where this one is, but it says this movie sucks, but now I'm crying because I'm lame.
What? Which part is that?
You don't want to guess?
No.
It was actually like at the funeral scene.
Oh.
I was like, damn, why am I crying? I hate this movie.
Yeah. So the part for me, I literally wrote this at the very end. I mean, I was talking about the kiss. I was like, yeah, man, I knew it was going to be there, but like I didn't need it or want it.
Yeah.
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 The glass thing at the end, I don't know. The shark and him like falling into the shark. The shark thing was.
I thought that was funny.
It is, but it's still
stupid.
Totally over the top. Lots of this movie I thought was funny. There were many lines. Like Hit Girl's like has her like one liner and then turns to Dave and she's like, "What do you think? I've been practicing a bunch of them." Like it's like that's funny. Yeah. It's funny. The big problem is like, is this a comedy or should I be taking it seriously?
Yeah, it's really hard to tell.
Because Dave's dad, you're right about Dave's dad's funeral. It's sad, man. Now he's put in the same position as
all of them.
Yeah.
They're all parentless.
Yeah.
They're just little orphans running around being crazy.
And what we never get explained is like, where's Dave going to go?
I know, because I think he's only like 17. He's not quite an actual adult yet.
No, so he's 17. He now has neither of his parents. Like, where's he going to go? I thought what was going to happen, he was going to wind up sibling-wise living with Mindy.
I hoped so, and then it didn't happen.
Because then Marcus could have been like, I'm going to help these kids stop dealing with the trauma of their being superheroes.
Yeah.
And then have them actually be siblings. I like that, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know, the ending of this movie is actually more perplexing than anything else in this movie.
It is.
Where are we going? What is this movie trying to say to me? Are superheroes good? Are they bad? Was any of this worth it? Like, the whole point at the end of the first movie was that like everyone could be a superhero. Anyone could be a superhero. You just had to go and do it. And at the end of this movie, I'm like, they stood up for something that they believed in, beat some supervillains who believed in the opposite, and then now they're not allowed to be a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And Hit Girl wasn't wanted for murder before, even though she saved Big Daddy Puke. But now she is wanted for murder. because she saved a bunch of people? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Internal logic is off.
Yep.
But I think we should get into some pitches.
Okay.
What did I write here? Jesus Christ, this movie goes from 0 to 100 all the fuck over the place, and not in a good way. I just write train of thought stuff, right?
In mine, so this was something that I was actually worried would happen, and I didn't bring it up last week because I didn't want it to be like, this is what I'm expecting, and then for it to actually happen, but it did. I was expecting, because the last movie went 0 to 100, I was expecting this one to be like, how are we going to top that 100,
Which
right?
they did.
And they did, and I was like, it's just not good.
It's I wouldn't even say it's not good. There's no such thing as bad art. It's just frustrating because it doesn't feel consistent.
Yeah.
And sometimes like juxtaposition can be useful.
Yep.
And I feel like this movie tries to do that. Like, we're getting like, oh, it's a comedy and you're laughing, but also you're laughing at stuff that when you stop laughing, it's really fucked up.
Yeah.
But the movie doesn't do that well enough.
What did they do with Stars and Stripes' dog?
Eisenhower.
I
Never
kind of wish
answered.
Eisenhower would hang out with Kick-Ass.
Maybe. I don't
feel
know.
like they'd be a really good
Probably
duo.
brought it to a shelter or put it down, knowing how the system works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we get into some pitches?
Yeah.
How you feeling about your pitch?
Can I start?
Yes.
Because I don't think that mine is super consistent with my previous pitch.
Okay, mine's not
I
either,
tried
but-
my best, but it's not the greatest.
Yeah.
So just to recap, in my last pitch, Kick-Ass was still single. His friends knew about him as Kick-Ass, Big Daddy, and what's his name? Chris's dad.
Charlie D'Amico.
Yeah, Charlie D'Amico. Like, they
name.
offed themselves, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Or they offed each other, I guess, not themselves.
Yeah.
And shit, what else? Yeah, that's mostly it. And Chris D'Amico was never actually
He was in Red
Mist.
Yeah.
So that I kind of kicked myself in the and shot myself in the foot with that one, but it's fine.
Okay, I did a bunch of stuff the same way because neither of us had seen it before or read any of the material.
Yeah.
So we were sort of going into this blind. Like, I just sort of was like, that's the theme of my second movie. I'm going to try and set it up. And then mine worked out actually very well in terms of theming, not so well in terms of narrative.
I don't really know how well mine worked, but we'll just get into it. So I said, we start with Kick-Ass and Hit Girl, and they don't really talk to each other much during school, but they do both go to school. And afterwards, they've been going out on missions. And by missions, I mean Kick-Ass has actually just been trying to do his homework and figure out what he's going to do with his life because he's in his final year of high school. And meanwhile, Hit Girl is just going and fighting crime because that's just what she knows. We get a little voiceover. Kick-Ass admits he's bored and he wants to get back into it. But just as he's finally managed to convince Hit Girl to take him on missions again, she's convinced by Marcus to put the costume away and just try to be a normal high schooler for once. So Kick-Ass is frustrated, and his friends find out that he was planning on going out on missions again. They practically beg him to let them join, and he's like he's got one condition. He's like, you have to stay out of the fight until you've been trained. Because when I did this last time, I got myself in way over under like my head and I had no idea what I was doing. And then I had someone to train me and it made it better. Also, one thing that I forgot was that Kick-Ass never actually killed anyone in the last movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, until then, they're helping with intelligence because he was kind of relying on Hit Girl to do intelligence. So, they're obviously like, yeah, okay, intelligence is still cool, so we'll just, help you figure things out. You do the fighting and then train us, and we'll be a trio of badasses. So they all come up with monikers for themselves, and one manages to come up with something original while the other one keeps trying to be a different iteration of Kick-Ass. Yeah.
So you're talking about Battle Kid or Battle Guy and Ass
Battle
Kicker.
Guy and Ass Kicker.
Yeah.
Ass Kicker. So I figured I didn't actually write it throughout here, but basically my idea of Ass Kicker would be that just every time that he shows up to a new fight or a training session, his costume is a little different, but still very Kick-Ass.
Kick-Ass. That's so funny. So they're just different. He can't come up with an original idea.
Yeah. So they tease each other and it's fun, and they also, get into business because And then Kick-Ass has no idea what he's doing on a good day. And so trying to train 2 additional newbies is also like way more difficult than he was expecting. Meanwhile at school, he keeps getting reminders like, you're in your senior year, you got to know what you're doing for college, you got to find a job if you're not going to go to college, you got to do all this stuff. And his dad is just trying to keep him out of trouble because, again, he's a teenage boy living in New York. Like, there's plenty of trouble you can get into. So we zip through some training montages where I figured it would be like almost like parallels of Kick-Ass trying to do like the training for his 2 friends while juggling school and family, and Hit Girl is attempting to become a normal girl after meeting some of the other cool girls in her grade. Then we flash forward to Kick-Ass trying to convince Hit Girl to at least just help him with training, and she's just like, no. And to prove a point, she asks some random guy out while Kick-Ass is feeling sad that she rejected him. He doesn't really understand why why asking some dude out was her way of getting like almost like revenge, I guess, for the argument. So while on patrol with the other 2, they actually run into another small group of heroes. They call themselves Justice Forever, and they tell Kick-Ass's trio that they need to be careful because there's some so-called villains. Supervillains.
That's the way a supervillain would pronounce it. Yes, I'm a supervillain.
They're out there hunting heroes. This is the first that Kick-Ass has heard about it, but at one point while at school, Hit Girl stops him to be like, hey, my dad is on a job right now trying to track down some guy hunting down heroes. You got to be careful.
Marcus, not Big Daddy.
Sorry, yeah. Just like hang up the suit and lay low for a while. And he says something about not needing advice from someone who's abandoned the cause.
Oh, snap!
And he moves on to keep going with the training and everything. So the trio they kind of meet up on and off with Justice Forever. And they take on some jobs together. Sometimes it's smaller things like just, touring around, making sure there's no burglars or anything, or people trying to steal purses or whatever the cliche is. And other times they're actually like going out and they do jobs because the 2 of Kick-Ass's friends are, intelligence. They're hunting down people trying to figure out what they need to do. Hit Girl's date doesn't go well. I still kept that in.
The same way? Like
in the same way.
They get date ditched?
It's not quite as in depth because we just know like Hit Girl just...
So it's just she just go on like a normal date and it doesn't go well? She
just goes on a date. She's not really quite as humiliated because, again, I'm not really focusing on Hit Girl as much. I didn't really know how I wanted it, just that she comes to him in the middle of the night just being like, I'm just sad. I want someone to talk to. And she apologizes for being like a jerk about everything. And Kick-Ass says something like, well, I mean, it's fine because... I think of you almost like a little sister, and siblings fight, and that's just what happens sometimes, right? And you can kind of see it on her face where she's just like, oh, emotional damage. And then, but at the same time, she's like, okay, at least I've still got someone I can lean on even after we argue. So while that's happening that same night, some of the members from Justice Forever get attacked. Even though they're not out on patrol or anything, they're just in their own homes. And then finally, the first recorded image of the hero hunters get released. It's Chris D'Amico. We know that it's Chris D'Amico because of the last movie.
Yeah.
And he has the name The Red Death because I could not
do motherfucker. No. I was the same way.
And he's released a video, first of all, of him basically taking down these heroes who were not ready for it. But also he is basically doing like a mini press release online because that's of course what he does. Yeah. And he states that he's looking to take down these people who stand in for so-called justice, even though they killed his father and his mother, even though his mother was never actually killed by either of them. And he spits out like 2 names. He says Kick-Ass and Hit Girl. And Kick-Ass is obviously like shook. And Hit Girl is just like, Kate, I haven't had the mask on. Like, no one's going to know where I am or who I am. So I think that I'm fine. And she begs her dad to find a way to keep the heroes safe. And he comes up with the idea of like banning masks, but then his precinct takes it a little too far and are like, we're just gonna ban heroes.
Ooh.
So they start, cracking down and trying to detain some people, but the main issue is that there's still some dirty cops, because you remember that was alluded to in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of simply taking away all of the, paraphernalia and the outfits and detaining them for something simple like illegal possession of weapons, they some of the police actually leak addresses to the hero killers, and suddenly there's like a whole wave of reports of just heroes showing up
Getting
dead.
Messed up. Fuck.
So they end up catching Kick-Ass's dad instead, and we can have that touching moment in the jail cell where he's like, let me take the fall, they'll only detain me for so long. And then Red Death basically admits who he is by sending a text to Kick-Ass with the photo of his father dead. So after this, and I still had basically the exact same conversation of like Kick-Ass being like, okay, I'll put the suit away, like I'll never do it again. He's grateful for his dad. So then both of Kick-Ass's friends are all riled up. They're like, we're gonna go find Chris, we're gonna go take out, like, just, we gotta stop this. And Kick-Ass is like, you're just gonna die, like, you guys haven't had the training, I don't know how to train you properly, I've barely had enough training. He's like, Hit Girl was right, we should have just all hung up our suits long ago. Justice Forever and Hit Girl and Kick-Ass's friends all show up to the funeral and they have a nice moment. Hit Girl apologizes again, being like, this is not what I intended when I asked my dad for help. Or not my dad, Marcus for help. And even Hit Girl is like, I would put on the suit to help you avenge them. And then all of a sudden Red Death shows up with his gang.
Oh.
But instead of, taking him away and they have that big fight and whatever, basically the whole thing is that some of the dirty cops, again, because I haven't been able to identify them, accidentally left for a smoke break, even though they were supposed to be like guarding the funeral. Mm-hmm. And then Red Death comes in with guns blazing and the fight takes place and all of the unmasked heroes are fighting together. And in the end, Kick-Ass is given the chance basically to like kill Red Death because he like manages to somehow steal a gun from him and then basically like turn it around. And they're like basically right on top of his dad's grave. And he's like, no, I'm going to give you over to the cops because I promised my dad I'd be done. And then I figured that the ending, because I really wanted it to be something a little bit less unsatisfying, I wanted to end with Mindy being like, this whole thing with Big Daddy becoming a vigilante because my mom died, and now your dad died because the police weren't doing their jobs, and this whole thing with Chris D'Amico and his dad, and just everything was just like, something needs to be done, and I'm gonna follow in my dad's footsteps, but I'm gonna do it the way he did originally. She's like, I'm gonna focus on school and I'm gonna go to school to be a cop.
Like a bait and switch.
Yeah.
I'm gonna focus on the way he did it as a cop. Oh.
Because that's what he did originally, right?
Yeah.
So
good. Yeah.
And then I was like, and then I would leave it ambiguous whether or not Kick-Ass decided to go along with that or not, because there's a lot going on for him.
Yeah. So you want to leave your character with with the choices that they can make.
Yeah.
I did something similar at the end of mine. So my movie starts out with Dave deciding he's basically, after all the shit that happened, so I'll do a recap, I should say.
Okay.
Which is also in there. So Dave we is remembering like so Red Mist was a thing. He was he basically betrayed Kick-Ass and Hit Girl. But then we don't know who Hit Girl is. She's older. Mm-hmm. Dave thinks it's Katie.
Right.
And at the end, when the Night Watchman died, Hit Girl like said that it was that was her father, and we know that Katie has also had like some weird stuff with her father. Mm-hmm. We then saw the two of them go and get revenge, where Kick-Ass defeated Red Mist, mm-hmm. and so Red Mist was knocked out, and then both Hit Girl and Kick-Ass couldn't defeat Charlie D'Amico. Yep. Because he pulled a gun out, and I'm assuming he like fired it a couple times, and like they almost died. but they never got hit. And then the entire town, like the public, showed up when they cared about Kick-Ass and Hit Girl. But we still don't know who Hit Girl is. So after this, Dave is basically like, I don't want to be a superhero anymore. Like, I saw a lot of shit. I'm not interested in this. But people care now because of what I did. So Kick-Ass did what he did. Now there are superheroes out there doing community service. Like, people are caring. They're calling the cops. They're doing what's right. So he's like, Kick-Ass doesn't need to be there anymore. But Dave is still suspicious because he thinks that Katie is Hit Girl, his girlfriend, and she keeps disappearing more and more, like in suspicious ways, where he's like, that's not even clever. Like, I used to do that, and these ways are not even clever. Mm-hmm. There's also a new kid at school whose name is Mindy, and we see that she wants to hang out with Dave. She actually thinks Dave is really, really cool. They're the same age, and he's like, this is really, really weird. And his girlfriend is like really jealous. Katie's like, where do you know this girl from? He's like, I don't. So one day Katie shows Dave where she's been disappearing to and reveals she's made her own superhero called Secret Siren. And Dave is impressed, but he's like disappointed that it's not Hit Girl, because he was like, there was this thing that connected us, right? And nobody's seen Hit Girl since. So Katie wants Dave to put his suit back on so that they can be superheroes together. And Dave is like, I'm done with that. Like, I can't go back to that anymore. It got real messed up. So he's hung up his mask, and Katie doesn't really understand why, and they argue. So this leaves Dave wondering who Hit Girl really is then. He puts a couple of like searches out on a website, and then Hit Girl shows up in his room in costume.
Okay.
And she's like, why are you trying to find me? Like, I'm done. And he's like, well, I just wanted to know who you were. And she's like, that's not the point of having a secret identity, Nimrod. And he asks, like, how do you continue after what happened? And she's like, I'm kind of confused as well. And then despite what she says, she takes her mask and wig off, and we see that it's Mindy.
Ah.
And he's like, whoa. And she's like, yeah, I knew you were Kick-Ass. Like, it's not hard to figure out because you don't cover your tracks very well. And I wanted to hang out with you because I knew what you did and that you genuinely cared about people, and that's what made you cool. Mm-hmm. And Mindy at school is like seen as mysterious, and that gives her a kind of allure. Mm-hmm. So that's why they're all like, why is she hanging out with Dave? Right? And his friends. So she explains that the Night Watchman was her father, and that she's sort of been trying to distance herself from him because she was basically trained as a child soldier. And now she's living with Marcus, who's trying to like get her back to having a normal life so she doesn't wear the mask anymore. So Dave's like, yeah, I think I get it. Like, I can't wear the mask. Like, I can't stop thinking about what happened when we almost got shot, like when he pulled a gun out. And it makes the mask really scary. And so they agree to be friends. So they're like hanging out more at school. Mindy runs home. Marcus realizes what he's done, and he's like, or what she's done. And she's like, no, I had to say goodbye to it one last time. And he's suspicious. He's like, I don't want to catch you out there with any superheroes. Because you need to move on. Like, they're not, those superheroes who are out there are doing community service. They're not doing what you and the Night Watchman did. Like, you have to let that go. Yep. At school, they like are starting to hang out. Dave introduces Mindy to his friends. The problem is that now as Mindy's like walls break down, not only is she mysterious, but now she's like funny and likable, and like this makes her very popular. And despite all these things, she still wants to hang out with Dave and his friends, and this makes Katie really jealous. Mm-hmm. And the two of them, like Dave and Mindy, are like very close, but Katie doesn't understand why, because she doesn't she can't understand the trauma that they went through, this thing that sort of binds them together. Yeah. But she doesn't know about it to the same extent. Meanwhile, Chris D'Amico decides if there's going to be superheroes, then there should be super villains. And he's like, especially after like Kick-Ass and Hit Girl like beat up my father and send him to jail, like I need to get vengeance. But they haven't been seen since. So he's like, I'm going to do this. So Katie once again asks Dave to come out with her. Think of it as a date. Put your on the mask. Think of it as a date. And we'll just go with a collective of superheroes and do community service. And Dave's like, this can't be so bad. So he puts the costume on, but including the mask, but he's still like, it's scary for him. He's very nervous. It was hard for him to put the mask on, and he can't really articulate why. So they meet Justice Forever, led by Colonel Stars and Stripes, and Battle Guy is there, and they just do community work. And Dave and Katie sort of connect over this. Like they just have a good time doing stuff and showing they care, which is why they originally got together.
Yep.
The reappearance of Kick-Ass on the news is a big deal and sets Chris into motion, causing him to become Blood Mist. I like how you went with Red Death and I went with Blood Mist. Red Death is a better name. I might steal it.
Go for it.
Because I just thought Blood Mist was emo-y enough.
It is.
So
both of them are really
when
emo.
Mindy finds out, she's really upset. She's like, we sort of agreed we weren't going to do this. And Dave's like, I just, I was doing something with Katie. I wanted to go back out. It was a big deal. People thought Kick-Ass coming out was a big deal. Katie takes this the wrong way when she sees the two of them arguing and thinks that they're like she's cheating or he's cheating on her, and just straight up breaks up with Dave. She's like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh.
And Dave is basically like, well, now I don't have Mindy and I don't have Katie, and all I have is my two friends. I think their names are Aaron and Todd. I'm just guessing.
Something like that.
And they're now superheroes. They're part of Justice Forever. So he's like, this is what we do. And he puts the mask back on and he buries himself in being Kick-Ass, even though he knows it's toxic. But he keeps working with Justice Forever, and he learns about all the different members, including Colonel Stars and Stripes, who's like, we're fighting the good fight. We're going to keep it. We're going to fight the war on injustice. One day, it's just a Colonel and Kick-Ass. Everybody else couldn't make it, and the Colonel's like, okay, it's the real heroes now. The two of us are the real heroes. And he winds up bringing Kick-Ass into a prostitution ring, like to try and deal with that. So it's the same scene, except it's just Kick-Ass and the Colonel. And but of course the gangsters have guns. One of them pulls it out, and immediately Dave has a flashback. He's like, I can't deal with this, and he's like having a whole episode. And they do manage to win. The Colonel manages to when they tie up the leader, Mr. Kim, and then the Colonel pulls a gun out. And Dave is like, what the fuck? And just leaves. He's like, I can't have people that I work with pulling a gun out.
Yeah.
And he just leaves. And we see the Colonel kill Mr. Kim.
Okay.
Dave then finds Mindy and explains what happened. And she's like, this is why we don't do this. Like, this is why I had to get out. This is why you had to get out. And I was in it for longer than you. They search up the Colonel's real name, and they find he's a military veteran who's being treated for PTSD, and he's taken the war home with him.
Right.
And he can't stop waging a war because that's all he knows how to do. It's how they're programmed, and nobody's helping him to like be a real person anymore.
Yeah. He still thinks he has to be a soldier.
Yeah. Exactly. Kick-Ass once again is in the shit. So Dave decides to go straight. He's like, I need your help. Starts hanging out with Mindy. The two of them are like reconnecting over this insane trauma that they deal with, but trying to like keep each other sane. Marcus is investigating the murder of Mr. Kim, who was killed by the Colonel, and discovers that Kick-Ass was there, effectively making Kick-Ass a suspect. So Marcus, because he's a detective, finds out that Dave is Kick-Ass, but because of this, because there's also like the corrupt cops and Chris has people on the inside, he also finds out. So he knows who Kick-Ass is.
Okay.
On the way, it's also revealed that because of this, all superheroes have been banned due to vigilantism, and so like a couple of bad people have ruined it for everyone. So that no more superheroes. It's not allowed. Marcus talks to Dave, like finds Dave, goes to his place, and at first he's like accusing him and telling him to stay away from Hit Girl, but then Kick-Ass is like, this is what happened. I wasn't there. I can't do this anymore. And Marcus is like, oh, I get it. Like, you're going through some shit. Like, he's like, this is the therapist that Mindy sees. You need to get help. Like, I can help you do this. So he's like, even the shit that detectives and first responders sees is fucked up, but we have supports. And while they're not great, that does mean we have something. Like, superheroes have nothing, and you really need to protect yourself. Blood Mist, so Marcus leaving Dave with that. Blood Mist shows up at Dave's house and is like, I know who you are, Kick-Ass, you're Dave. And he's like, fine. Great, but like, I'm not gonna fight you. And Chris is like, but I'm a supervillain, and you created me, Dave, because you killed sent my father to prison. And Dave is like after just talking to Marcus, is like, no, you're a kid in a mask pretending that your father didn't pull a gun on on two high schoolers. Like, fuck off. I'm not doing this anymore. And then the triads show up after Mr. Kim. They think that Kick-Ass was involved, and they kidnap both Chris and Dave.
Okay.
Because they also know that Kick-Ass is Dave, and they just take Chris with them because he's dressed like a superhero, even though he's a super villain.
Yeah.
Chris is freaking out because he's like, I was just like, he realizes he's just play acting at being a villain because he wanted revenge for his dad, but he just realizes none of this is real, and the gangsters are like actually going to torture them, and Dave has already been tortured once, so he's going through like this, like he's back to a place he doesn't want to be in anymore, like huge, and he's not even wearing the mask. And Chris is like, oh shit, this is what my dad was gonna do to you guys. And it's like, yeah. So the Colonel shows up, but instead of saving them, he thinks Dave gave up his identity. So now the Colonel is also fighting off the triads, but is trying to get Dave to admit that he's not part of the cause or commit his life to the cause, to this war. And Dave's like, I can't do this. And then Hit Girl shows up in costume.
Okay.
And basically like kicks everyone's ass, including the Colonel, which is unfortunate, but Chris runs away realizing that he's like, I'm just an emo kid, and he like runs away. He's like, so then the police show up, and Dave and Mindy take their costumes off and throw them away for good. And Dave is like, I'm so sorry that you had to put your costume on. Like, I know you were trying to like get away from Hit Girl. And she's like, real superheroes are people who protect each other and the ones they love, even though they might die, and even though they might hurt themselves. And the two of them embrace and promise to help each other get through their shit. Yeah. So superheroes are not allowed in the city anymore, and there's a big crackdown. So a few weeks later, Dave is back in school. Mark has managed to keep Dave's identity a secret to anybody else, as well as Mindy's, and Chris as well. So like only a few people know that Dave was Kick-Ass. And Dave is now seeing a therapist, and he's hanging with his friends at school, including Mindy. And we see the two of them holding hands. And Dave explains that there could be more between them in the future, but right now what they need is to support each other as they try to like get better. Yeah. So he's like, there might be more, but neither of them is ready for that. They just need each other's support. So yeah, I wonder what my theme was.
Yeah, that was good.
Well, I was really trying to go for PTSD because we had talked that sort of half pitch that we did talking about like the stakes of pulling a gun. Yep. And then when I sort of realized I had already done that in my first pitch when Chris D'Amico or Charlie D'Amico pulls out the gun. Yeah. And is like gonna shoot Hit Girl, and I realized like there's a lot of trauma that I could deal with that. And then when Colonel Stars and Stripes showed up, I was like, what if he was an actual colonel and he was actually a little fucked up in terms of, because then I could explore ideas of like PTSD in war and not being able to come home. I could explore that PTSD doesn't have to be just from war. It can be from the trauma of seeing someone get shot, or being shot at yourself, or going through torture, or being a child soldier. Like all of these things that I could then like explore through Hit Girl, Dave, and the Colonel. And
a little bit of Marcus as well.
Yeah, and Marcus as well. Because I want to talk about first responders. So like the themes, that's the big theme I wanted to go for. And people might say like, well, the Colonel went through way more than Dave. Yes, 100%. But he's not dealing with it effectively, which is what I wanted to get at. And that doesn't mean we should like discredit Dave's trauma. Yeah. Because just because it's different doesn't mean it's not as effective to him. It's not, causing him stress and trauma just because it was different or lesser. It still matters for both Hit Girl and Dave. Yeah. And I also liked the idea, because Hit Girl was older in mine, I liked the idea of the two of them could be romantic. I just had to make sure that they looked after themselves first. Because that's really important. It's really important. So I was like, there could be more, but neither of them are ready to explore that until they've both gotten through more of their trauma. So they use each other for support, which might turn into more. It just can't yet. What
I also really like about that is that both characters seem fairly mature, because they both had to grow up, like especially in that moment that the gun was pulled out. That's, I think we talk about like loss of innocence every once in a while, and that was definitely one of those times, right? And so they treat their relationship as friends and potentially romantically. They treat it more, I guess, as people in their later years would. Yeah. So.
Well, they both know they're in high school, but it was important to me that the focus was on trauma. Yeah. And I couldn't have a romance between them undercut that. Yeah. I liked the idea that the two of them use each other for support, and that there was a clear connection that could be more, and the connection ran deep, so it could be more, but that connection couldn't be more until they were better, and that the support they needed from each other had to be important, but it couldn't be anything more than that until they were better. Yeah.
So you said that you also had an idea for another, like a third movie, or did you?
No, I'm saying you said you had an idea.
No, I've got an idea, not for a third movie, but for like a
spin-off. I don't know if I could go anywhere with a third movie. The only thing that I might have done is like not a pitch from my movie, because my movie feels really done, and I wanted it to be done, to talk about trauma and be like, you have to move on from that. That's why superheroes have to be like, they have to move on. Both Hit Girl and Kick-Ass have to move on from that.
Yeah.
So it has to be done for me.
Yeah.
For these characters. But if I were to take what we got in the original and pitch a third, it would be Hit Girl coming back and being against the law. Like, she's a vigilante now, which is interesting, because now we have like her against the law, but also trying to be a superhero above and outside the law while running from it. Basically Daredevil.
Yeah.
The Daredevil series.
Yeah, basically.
Except with Hit Girl. And then Dave getting caught up, even though he doesn't want to be a hero anymore.
Yep.
Dave getting caught up with that, being like, Hit Girl's going to get into trouble and nobody's going to be there to save her, and he feels like he's going to have to be the one to save her. And I think it would be amazing if the cops had their hands tied somehow, and Marcus actually goes to Dave and is like, you have to put the costume on.
Yeah.
And you have to go and save
I think that'd
Hit Girl.
be really cool.
Yeah. Especially because I would want them to be like that much older. I want Hit Girl to be 20 and Dave to be like 23, starting as a young professional or in university or whatever, and all of a sudden having his life fall apart as he goes back to being a superhero. Now, he doesn't have the same kind of trauma that I'm talking about in my pitch.
Yeah.
But so watching his life sort of collapse around him as he puts the mask back on. I also would push for romance between, even though there's like an age difference. Once you're 20 and 23, I feel like the age difference doesn't matter anymore.
Not as much.
And no. I feel like Mindy and Dave would be able to explore that in that version much more readily.
Yeah.
But I think maybe,
because I'm sure she would still have some lingering feelings.
Yeah, and maybe they've only like continued to develop because she just left him, right?
Yeah.
After a kiss. Like, that could be hugely like emotional. You remember what you think you remember, and then when she shows up, she's like, Dave, I'm back, it's me. And he's like a 23-year-old, I don't want to say nobody, but he's like happy and content with his life, but it's not the adrenaline fueled life that Mindy lives, and she's super disappointed. And he's like, I can't deal with you. Yeah. But
okay, so my idea for a spinoff would be the rest of the Justice Forever crew now doing stuff kind of a little bit outside the law, but without any masks on.
Interesting.
But
how would you do? Because superheroes aren't allowed anymore.
I know.
So how would you make that?
They wouldn't dress like superheroes. They would if anything, they'd dress more like your average wrongdoer, like, walking around with your stereotypical, like the hood up, trying to avoid attention or whatever.
If I was going to do that, because I do think it's interesting, I would have it be vignettes.
That's what I would.
5 or 6 minute vignettes about what happened to those characters after.
That's what I would want, because I really liked them. I liked their backstories. Like
I thought they were
#tragic backstory, right?
Yeah. But I thought it was interesting because I think it would be interesting to see how do you, because they were using superheroes as a way to feel like they were contributing.
Yeah.
So how does Night Bitch move on to helping get over her sister's death and murder?
Did you notice the inconsistency with Night Bitch's name throughout the movie?
No, why?
At one point they call her something a little less, well, I mean, it's all pretty vulgar, but
I think the idea behind her was that the implication I got was that her sister was a prostitute.
Yeah.
And that she had been murdered and left in a dumpster.
Yeah.
And Night Bitch was out there trying to avenge, and so by calling herself Night Bitch, it was like
taking back the name,
right? It's about, a Night Bitch is basically a euphemism for a prostitute. So she's being like, I'm a superhero who is a prostitute, who can defend others like her sister.
Yeah.
Remembering Tommy, I thought, was just two parents that had lost their kid.
Yeah.
Which is tragic. Just
so tragic.
So awful. So I think it would be nice to see what if the change the superheroes had created in the city was actually affecting change within their individual lives. Like they managed to maybe not find Tommy, but
at least gain some closure.
Get some closure. Same with Nightbish. Same with even Battle Kid. Like showing how Battle Guy, showing how he didn't have a tragic backstory, but just like how did the superhero thing give him some kind of purpose. Yeah, because
before his purpose was just buying comic books and hanging out with the friends.
Yeah, which is a great purpose. But maybe this gave him a trajectory, and now all of a sudden he's like, that trajectory meant something, and maybe he carries that on in a more legitimate way, not being a police officer, but maybe like, oh, like I can actually help people. Like this is what I want to do. I actually want to do something where I help people, and maybe he joins like a suicide hotline. Yeah, and gets the training so that he can, like, this is what he wants to do.
Help. Yeah.
That would be interesting if it was a little more humanizing.
That's what I would want. Like, bring it back to that first half of the first movie. They've all got really low stakes again because they don't have the masks on, and then they're just trying to do stuff. And some of them might not be doing it the fully legal way, but some of them might be doing it like within the system. And yeah. I
just think the real thing that I lost from these movies was the humanizing element. We constantly go back and forth between, are we regular people or are we superheroes? Where's the human element gets lost in that. You know, when you watch Spider-Man, you have to suspend your disbelief. There's superhero stuff happening, but you can do that with a certain degree of believability, and I felt like the tone of these movies didn't quite get there. That being said, I'm really glad we watched them. There were some really fantastic themes and ideas in these movies, so I don't think that they were necessarily bad, but I did get some whiplash while watching them.
Yes, I feel that.
Yeah. Any last minute thoughts about Kick-Ass 1 and 2?
Not really. It just, if anyone wants to try remaking them, but like less 0 to 100, I'd be down to watch it.
Yeah. Or maybe go check out the books and leave a comment if you're like, actually, Kick-Ass, the comics was like way different. And in the movies, they decided to tone that up for certain reasons. Because, you know, maybe the movie was or the books were more realistic, but they had to change it because the movie requires, you know, all movies require a certain degree of action, and so maybe
a little bit more interest, right?
The direction they went. I don't know, or maybe they were all the time over the top, and that was the point.
I'd like to read them though, now that I know that they exist.
Yeah. Where can people find you?
You can find me at twitch.tv/AlyssaLou with 3 O's.
You can find our band Robot Philosopher anywhere you listen to music. You can also check out our other channel, the CineCasters, for more scripted content, and stay tuned for more superhero stuff all Suptember long. Thanks so much for watching.
Bye.
Peace.